That's going to be aggressive. So I'm glad I noted that Serral can also do something different before I went into a whole spiel about only uThermal and his differences. So anyways, to get this over quick, Lightshade is actually the same rush distance as Submarine. It's actually just as small. And it's got a lot of area around that third that could complicate things like defending against a 1-1 Roach push. But I'm not sure if Serral's going to be thinking about that. I want to know exactly what he wants to do with this earlier aggression, and I don't know if uThermal's going to scout it, man. Like, you just kind of assume that Serral's going to macro and beat you in the macro game, right? So usually the one trying to apply the aggression or cut the corners macro-wise. And yeah, no SCV scout right into a reactor.
See, there are some nice things about reactor first in Terran versus Zerg, and I actually like it when you can get away with it. This is a pretty explicit scenario where if he doesn't go for 2 Marines, the Reapers are going to come out real slow, and I don't think you can get a cancel on this. Like, I'm not going to go that crazy with it, but I will say the potential to get some damage on the command center to prevent it from being built for a little bit. All very real threats, and like we were discussing earlier, one of the most important things to keep in mind, by the way, he is building Marines out of the barracks. This is very important to note because they take like half as long as Reapers. So he will have at least a few units to fight. And that's why I said I don't think he'll get canceled. He could still get the SCV if he has 3 Lings fight the Marines and 1 just kind of nibble away at it. But at the end of the day, it's also kind of Serral he's giving himself the opportunity to be able to deal with, attacks like this, right? Like if uThermal was the one being aggressive, having the fast speed, having the fast pool would still be something that's valuable, even if he can't get damage done. So I don't hate it. It seems like he's waiting for a Reaper to leave before he sends the Lings in, but there's no Reaper coming.
There is not, no. And I mean, his Overlord could have tried dipping in earlier to see a reactor being built, but there's the catch, right? You expect either a Reaper Marine, and then you have to be careful not to lose it, or, I mean, you really are just going to guess and then not want to have them maybe lift a barracks and kill your Overlord. So Serral's actually got his Overlord in a very odd position, that didn't see the lack of Reaper. The Marines are finally revealed to the Lings, and Serral knows what the actual opener was as a reactor first. So he's got faster speed, but that really just seems to be all of it. Okay, I was going to say he's still mining gas, so it's got to be something else, and a Roach Warren does go down. So uThermal, again, all about, like, is he actually going to be able to get any scouting? He didn't get scouting on this earlier pool, but that ended up being totally fine. But he definitely needs to get a scout on this Roach Warren. The Hellions, they could try and dive in if they think there's no Lings. I mean, they could get a couple of drones and ideally steal the Roach Warren, but now that's not usually what they're banking on happening. He's going to try? Nope. So these Hellions somehow have to see the Roaches coming across the map, and then they have to defend super quickly because of what I noted is that the rush distance between the nat to nat actually as small as Submarine, guys. It'll happen quickly.
Yeah, you can get across this map pretty fast. And their third command center is going to go up now as a part of the wall, as we do have some Roaches coming out. Not the most crazy response for dealing with Hellions, but with 6, we always stare at that number because usually the Zerg is going to stop at 6 when they're just being defensive. Sometimes you'll squeeze out a few extra because you want to do a counterattack, maybe more of a few Ravagers, but the important thing is, I guess this third base has quite a few angles of penetration that you can bring the Hellions to try and attack it. So you do kind of need something other than just like a little wall and some Zerglings, right? Or unless the point of the Roaches is to just go across the map and force everything to come back and defend. But this is a lot. This is a lot to not be taking that seriously, I feel like, out of Serral. But if he kills the medevac, I guess eventually he'll bleed this out. How much is he going to get done on the other side of the map is maybe the bigger question. 38 workers each.
He's actually going to commit to this.
Yeah. This is crazy, Zombie Grub.
Yeah, I think that Serral, like, uThermal, if he had gotten that scout earlier and then maybe immediately pulled back, he wouldn't have been in such a terrible position, but he lost everything on the offensive, thinking that maybe this would favor him, and maybe, Serral wasn't going to commit, which he's only kind of halfway committing. He did make a lot more Lings, but he's going back on the drones, but his committal works out even without those Lings supporting him. He cancels the third CC, gets a couple supply depots, going to grab a couple of SCVs as well, and this is just a bad start for uThermal. Serral, I might actually I think he's going to end the game here, or if uThermal doesn't tap out.
He's doing game-ending damage.
Yeah.
Whether or not uThermal leaves the game in the next, minute or so. He's at half the worker count, and important to note, this isn't like, oh yeah, you lost a bunch of SCVs, 3 orbitals, lol kek XD. It's like, no, he his third command center got canceled. He's rebuilding it. It's still not even done yet. So the opportunity to kind of recover what he's lost is still a bitter memory at the present time. The only advantage, or the only thing here, I guess we should say, if there's a silver lining for uThermal, it's that the investment to make this kind of attack work on the Zerg side delays the lair a lot. So the lair isn't even done. He doesn't have to really, well, at least we know he doesn't have to think about mutas yet or Anitis yet. But now, see, Serral's building another Ravager over there, and he's got a couple more links moving. So maybe he's not even thinking about a lair or any of those things. He's just going to let that finish and try to yeet the Corrosive Bile. Gets one of the tanks on the left side. There is still the high ground tank. Gets in a few shots, but now it's not in range anymore. So, yeah. Maps where the ramp, you can't defend your natural from your main. Makes me sad.
That's actually a problem for what could have been the follow-up. It's not, though. He's getting a Bailey Nest. But if it was like a Roach follow-up for like a mid-game push, that could be a problem for defending the third, too. But I was going to say, I love that the Marine, with its last dying breath, took out the Overlord. So at least the tank was truly safe up there. Yeah, uThermal is in a desperate place. You're right. Like, the best way to put it was that was game-ending damage, and you wouldn't have really blamed uThermal for tapping out. It's the latter game. We say that all the time, definitely taps out. But you're right about the lacking layer and lacking technology. Usually we see some type of comeback happen because, 3 mules, which, he doesn't have until just now. But then also because of drops. The drops suddenly go out of control, grab queens, grab roaches, grab drones. That's also not happening. So it really is just Serral getting bigger and better and uThermal desperately trying to catch up. And I guess hope that Serral over-invests into a push. But I don't think Lightshade is very good defensively. I've been talking about this since the beginning of the game. When it comes to these mid-game Roach pushes, whether it's pure Roach or Roach Baneling, which apparently it is going to be, that is a huge concave for the Zerg army to get. Tanks are not going to help. There's no high ground that helps with the SCD line either. I mean, it's terrible for the Terran in this situation for multiple reasons.
Yeah, this specifically this base too, right? Because the other base is a little bit further away, but you have like the ramp to work with. There's a little bit of a choke point there to kind of try to block it. But this third base reminds me, it makes me think a lot about Pillars of Gold, if I'm being honest, right? Where you just like, you can't wall this off. Just look at it. It's a giant wide plane. It actually like feels weird to look at because it's like almost no map in StarCraft has just had this many just big old planes right next to each other. It's a very large amount of flat open space, which there are ways that you can work with that. For an end game scenario, you could build, a bunch of freaking PFs or something and block it off. But in this type of situation, it gets quite hard. And he's going to get caught going right through the choke and instantly dies. There you go. GG. Serral takes game numero uno. And that's, remember that? I feel like we had a conversation earlier about how when your best units are your units that have to plant themselves and they're not planted, things usually don't go very well.
Yeah. I wonder if Lightshade is kind of still being figured out. It is, I think, of the new maps, one of the lesser ones chosen. But, certainly still more than Submarine. Very different terrain on those 2 maps for certain, even though the rush isn't so similar. But I think most of that opening from uThermal was the hot idea that Serral isn't going to cheese him. But Serral can, and we saw that he will. He will take the opportunity. He will start things off, even at a loss, even if he loses, just to make sure that no one assumes forever that he's going to be safe and that he does get a couple of free wins, which that kind of felt like a free win. Didn't require too much finesse on that one. And now on Death Aura, we might see what we kind of expect from Serral, which is straight up macro. And uThermal can actually do whatever cleverness he was thinking about doing last game. The double drops and the Hellion drops, which didn't end up really doing as much as he wanted.
It's one of the things that we talk about as being a weakness of some of the more like famous macro players. And Serral kind of was going down that road a little bit where, I feel like this conversation gets beaten to death every time we cast him because he does cheese now. But people are like, oh, if he doesn't cheese regularly, just be crazy greedy and try that. But Serral's like, no, I will happily do things that can punish you for these types of builds. And it's even more risky, honestly, doing like those types of 2-base type pokes because it's a lot harder to transition out of that if it fails when you play Zerg, like compared to just like throwing down that third CC, getting the rest of your upgrades going. Like if you don't have your lair, there's not really a whole lot of ways to go if you just throw those Ravagers away and they all die without killing anything. So Serral has just been, I think one of the things that I have to compliment him for in this play is that he has done a great job of building up that range and still having the macro talent to follow it up, which is, it's invaluable. Just having all of the normal high level skills, but also not being predictable. Like you can't really know 100%.
Yeah. Especially if he's going to beat his opponents to being unpredictable, right? Because Serral has been beaten by the surprise double battlecruiser or the surprise kind of fake 2-1-1 that goes in a mech or whatever, right? And if he can just kill him before that even happens, when he doesn't.
Don't get me excited. Don't get me excited talking about battlecruiser rushes, okay? For some reason, I thought we might see more Terrans try that against Protoss, but we already went through 2 of those series without the rush. I need that rush. All right, loading into Death Aura. We went from light to darkness here. We are in the bottom right with the blue Terran player. He is Team Liquid's uThermal. Not me thermal, uThermal.
Is that still going on? Okay, yep, that was a long one. In the top left, that's the red Zerg. We got Ence's Serral.
Yeah, the audio on the program feed for me was bugging out a little bit, so I don't hear the guitar riffs today, sadly.
Oh, you're gonna be so it's
or heavy metal riffs. Maybe it's a banjo or a ukulele playing.
You continue. Yeah, I inadvertently I shouldn't have raised the volume there. It's quite borked. But anyways. We'll try and work around it, I suppose.
Whoa! You see that?
Yeah. I mean, 12 doesn't sound like a lot, but ouch.
Looks like Serral put the fear into him. He's like, you know what? Maybe I don't go reactor first this time. Maybe we're going to try and take this into a slightly different direction. And I don't hate it, right? A regular Reaper expand is not the worst thing to do in a Terran versus Zerg. And Death Aura is a ginormous map. The 4-base setup is relatively easy to get, but as a Terran tries to expand in the later stages of the game, that 5th or 6th base can get really hard because it's very difficult to expand 2 ways in any of those directions past the 4th. So this map, I say, a big focus for Terran against Zerg is really doing something about the Zerg's 4th if you can. I know it's difficult, but that's just the way that it is. You got to try and cull the Zerg economy at some point. Zerg is, we talked about this a bit with the TVPs, but when you're playing against Zerg, if you decide to do hey, let's both sit back and chill, you're throwing the game away for the most part. Like the whole premise of the Zerg is you got to stop them. You got to cut off all the arms as it starts to spread and grow and take over the map and limit the amount of economy that you're going to give to Serral, assuming that he doesn't just kill you with 6 Ravagers, of course. But I think it's just worth pointing that out. Because this map is very big and you get those first 4 bases, you need to really strategize your TVZ play around making sure that the Zerg player doesn't get that 5th and then keep you off of your own 5th, which I think is a trap a lot of players fall into.
Well, I have something interesting going on build order wise, more interesting than I thought it was going to be. Okay, so the barracks was lifted, and I was like, what's going on here? It looked like he was setting up for a 2-1-1. Literally, he had 2 barracks in a factory being produced. He actually does swap off to the Hellions, but is still going to have a faster stim than perhaps Serral would anticipate. This has kind of become a popular build, the 2-1-1 after 3cc, and has also been a jumping point for Kier to go into his a bajillion Widow Mines play that we saw, both in GSL as well as the King of Battles tournament. So I'm going to be paying close attention to that, but you're definitely right about the way that this map is probably going to play out if we do get to that stage. We can see definitely a good pushing point from the Terran, but if then the Zerg is able to really start pulling on the right side or left, wherever they're expanding, right, it can get difficult to keep up. And we see, I would say I see a lot of emphasis from Zerg players on that mid-game push and pull, Ling, Bane, Ling, Muta. So that's what I'm expecting from Serral. Of course, it's worth throwing out there that people are still experimenting with lurkers, and he still does the Hydra game occasionally, but that's what I'm expecting. So with this Overlord speed, actually going to be able to scout the exact build order, which is nice. I think I want to get a second scout as well to make sure it's not some tricky, Hellion still being produced Hellbat thing.
He kind of has in his vision, the last thing he saw was the liftoff animation beginning for the factory. So he kind of knows that it's on the move, but he also does have an Overlord still tucked behind the main base. So if he does want to dive in and get that follow-up scout, he certainly can. I think it's one of my favorite things about Serral as a player is that despite how much people love arguing over whether basic things are worth it or viable, Serral's like, no, I love getting Overlord speed because knowing what my opponent is going to do allows me to use my very wrinkled brain to ascertain the next move to actually win the game. You know, like, it's not as much as StarCraft is a very mechanically difficult game, there is still strategy and, you know, brain power involved. So I always love giving the credit to Serral where he deserves it, because he gets the read on the really fast, the criminally fast third CC, but also seeing that there were Hellions being built with like a kind of 2-1-1 setup. He should be expecting like a stim push with a bunch of Hellions and a medevac way earlier than any normal game would bring it, because that's what's happening. He's bringing the medevacs over right now. Yeah,
including the armory for this. To have Hellbats with the first drop is going to be an extra little bit of pepper that you wouldn't expect. I don't think it's actually going to change too much, though, just because, I mean, there's a certain amount of Banelings that are going to work against the Marines and the Hellbats, you know, because they both have the same weakness. But let's see if Serral has that amount of Banelings. It certainly doesn't have Baneling speed, but that seems like plenty of Banelings to me. A last-minute split, really kind of awkward around that pillar, around his Hellbats, and he just